Hello everyone, my name is Abby and I am the Young Adult Assistant at the Twin Lakes Library System and I use she, her pronouns. So for today, I am going to be talking about 3 books that I think are underrated, and I just mean I don't feel like I hear a lot of people talking about them or a lot of people recommend them to read. So I'm going to talk about my 3 favorite books. The first 2 books are in our physical library collection, but the third one is actually not, but it is available for ebook on Hoopla. So just know that going into it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And the first book I do not own. I read the library copy, so I don't have a way to show you what it looks like. But that book is The Wicker King by Ancrum. And I didn't find a Common Sense Media age recommendation for this. I would say it's probably for a little bit more mature audiences and readers, so I'd probably say it's for ages 15, but up to your discretion. So this book is about 2 boys, and they are best friends, August and Jack, and Jack starts having these hallucinatory visions, which are as a result of a degenerative hallucinatory disorder, and August is trying to sort of help him cope with that. And these visions take sort of the appearance of this elaborate fantasy world, and it's ruled by the Wicker King, which is who Jack sees in his visions. And Jack is sort of trying to complete a quest in his hallucinations, and August sort of joins him in this as a way to sort of be supportive, but then he sort of starts to kind of blur the lines between reality and these images that Jack is seeing himself. And so they're sort of trying to cope with everything that's happening and sort of trying to establish what is real and what's not real. And, some things happen because of that. And I don't want to say too much because I think it's actually a book that's really good if you don't know a lot about it going into it. So that's all I'm going to tell you about. So why I loved it. I think the narration style was really interesting. The way that Ancrum wrote it, it's fascinating to see because you follow these 2 boys and it's sort of third person, but it's very personal for third person about me. Third person, by the way, is, if you don't know what third person narration is, it's when it's sort of the narrator is looking at the scene, but they're not a part of it necessarily. So you wouldn't use I in third person narration. They'd be he, she, they, all sorts of things. So the narration style is really interesting and complex, and I enjoyed it. And then to sort of go along with that, the characters are really fascinating to follow. Jack and August, their friendship is something deeply complicated and fascinating to see as it goes along, and I really appreciated watching it and seeing how it changes throughout the book. And then they also introduce a character named Rena, who is added to their dynamic and sort of changes things up and adds a different perspective that I think is really cool and I like seeing. And then to go along with that is the developing relationships that happen in this book. They have a very interesting relation dynamic in this book, the 3 of them, and I think it's something I haven't really seen in YA before, or not done well in YA before, even adult fiction as well. So I liked seeing it. And seeing it develop, and the way that Ancrum writes it is very, respectful, and, it's just fascinating to see. So I liked that. I think there's also really interesting visual aspects in the book. So as the book goes on, this isn't really a spoiler, but as the book goes on, the pages start to get darker. In terms of the coloring of it, which is supposed to sort of symbolize them getting deeper and deeper into this world. And I think that added a really, an important, characterization for the story and the way that the story is presented to the reader. I think it adds a lot. I think it helps you better understand what's happening and how severe it's getting as it's happening. So I'm glad that Ancrum included that. I think it really helped the story. I think that the mental health depiction in this book was really well researched, and obviously Ancrum spent a lot of time looking into it and making sure that they're doing a respectful job with it, which I really appreciated seeing. It didn't feel like gimmicky or inappropriate or like it wasn't done well, so I liked that. And then the last thing I really liked about it is it was a really fast read. This book, it's not a very long book, and the way that the writing works and the pages changing the way they do, it's, you know, it's kind of set up to be a pretty fast read, but I probably read this book in like 2 days, and I like, you know, I'm a full-time college student as well, and I'm getting a degree in English, so I read constantly for school. So I have very little time to like read for fun, and I finished this so fast. Like, I finished it so fast, which never happens when I'm in school. It takes me like a month to finish a book, but the fact that I did this during the school year and read it in 2 days was pretty incredible. So that kind of tells you it's a very quick read, and also it's compelling enough to keep you reading. So like, you know, just so you know. So that's the first book that I'm going to be talking about. The next book that I'm going to be talking to you about is The Problem with Forever by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So just for a little background, I have this book actually. I bought this book. So that's the book. So really interesting, well, not necessarily really interesting, but something that I think is interesting is Jennifer L. Armentrout actually has 2 sci-fi fantasy series that are actually pretty well known, at least in like when like sort of fantasy sci-fi was becoming more popular, which was probably like maybe 2011 or 2012. So like 2009 to 2011, 2012 is when it was like, I think, at its peak. And she has 2 series in there. I think it's the Lux series and the White Hot Kiss series. And those were very popular when they initially came out. But she's still writing a lot. And this book came out, I believe, after those books. I don't know, I'm not like a Jennifer L. Armentrout expert. This is actually the only book I've read by her, so I can't actually speak to when it was published, but I think it was published after those books were out. And it's very different from those books. And I really liked this book, obviously. So, you know, she sort of started to go into more contemporary books, and they're not talked about as much, and I kind of wish they were because they're really good. So I'm going to actually tell you what this book is about now. So this book follows Mallory Dodge, who has been in foster care for a lot of her life and was in a really bad situation before her current foster home, so like 4 years before the start of the book, that she's in a foster home that's really bad. They don't take care of her. They're abusive. Like, they treat her very poorly. And, you know, she has a lot of trauma and a lot of coping with all of that. And thankfully she gets put with a couple after that who have really come to terms with that and taking care of herself. And they homeschool her and they take care of her. But, you know, now that she's sort of in a place where she's a little bit more stable, she has decided that she's going to attend a public high school. Which is not something she was expecting. But she is doing it, and she's sort of excited about it. But on her first day of school, she doesn't meet him. She runs into this boy named Ryder, who was her friend when she was in foster care and also kind of protected her when she was in foster care on her first day of school. And so they sort of reconnect and sort of try to rebuild their relationship with each other, but they are both, you know, they both come from a very bad situation, so they've both been traumatized, so they're trying to take care of each other, and Mallory is, you know, trying to help Ryder sort of cope with some of the things that have happened to him, and helping him sort of get onto a better track. So, why I loved this book. The family dynamic I really loved seeing. So, Mallory's foster parents, Rosa and Carl, they are great. They are so good. I think I've talked about this before, but I don't think in YA there are a lot of books that I read. I read a lot of really intense YA books, so maybe that's why this is true for me, but I find that parents and families are not very kind or supportive typically in YA books. So it's always nice to me to see that, and because I like seeing that, because a lot of the time these characters are going through really horrible things and you want them to have some sort of support system. So it's nice seeing that, especially when you consider like Mallory's backstory as a character. I'm glad that Armentrout, put her in a good situation with loving and caring people. So that was really nice to see. I think this book, I've sort of talked about it, but like this book has a lot of depth. It has a lot of important commentary about, abuse and the foster system, and, whether it's all accurate is, it is fiction. So some of it, she does embellish a little bit, but she does a really good job at least making like important conversations about those two things and sort of addressing it, which I also feel like foster care is not necessarily addressed very much in YA. I think there are a few books that do it, but I don't think it's like a topic that comes up a ton, so it's nice to see it and show the different sides of it. I'm glad she worked and did sort of research into the different sides. And, sort of dealing with trauma and abuse and how that can affect you and how it shapes who you are. Also, by the way, I also couldn't find a common sense media rating for this. I would say this is for 14 or 15-year-olds. But anyways, so it has a lot of depth and it talks about a lot of really important things. I really loved Mallory as a character. She goes through a lot before the book starts, and definitely stuff that has lingered and has really shaped who she is as a character. But she overcomes a lot, and she develops into such a very strong person and someone you really genuinely care about and want really good things to happen to. So I like that. I'm glad that Armentrout wrote her the way that she did, because it made her someone to root for and someone you cared about and wanted good things to happen to. And then the last thing, this book is technically a romance book. However, I feel like the romance sort of is kind of like a subplot in that it's more about like the healing of the two main characters, but because of that, I think the romance is really well written. I don't think anything feels forced. It doesn't feel like it's insta-love. I don't think that they are like using each other to heal. Like, they definitely lean on each other, but that's partially because they came from similar situations. But, it's very responsible in that, like, neither one puts too much on the other one. And like, if it does start to become that way, like, one of them is like sets a boundary, which I think is important, and I'm glad that Armentrout, made that an element of their relationship. So yeah, so those are the reasons I really liked that book. And then the last book I'm going to talk to you about today is Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, and this is by Jessie Andrews, and this is the book that is not, at least according to Pines, in our physical collection, but it is on Hoopla in ebook form. So this isn't like the Wicker King. There's no pictures or anything, so like, you're not missing out on anything if you decide to read the ebook versus a physical copy. So this book it follows our narrator, Greg Gaines, who is in high school. He's in his senior year, and he's kind of has a knack for being able to float through different social groups. He has one like really good friend named Earl, and they make movies together, but they're kind of weird cult classic sort of movies. Not something that you would traditionally see in like a movie theater or something, but they enjoy it. But Greg is kind of like, he's not an outcast per se because he gets along with everyone, but he like doesn't really have a defined social group, and he kind of likes it that way. However, his plans kind of have a wrench thrown in them because Greg's mom wants him to start up his friendship again with his childhood friend Rachel. And the reason for this is Rachel is diagnosed with leukemia. And, his mom wants him to reach out to her and check in on her. And, Greg hasn't talked to her since they were kids. So it's kind of awkward for them because there's not like a real relationship there anymore. So they sort of work to become friends again. And in the process, Greg and Earl decide to like film a movie for Rachel because she really enjoys the movies that they make. And this story kind of just follows them developing and growing as people. So why I love this book. So if you, there's like a surge in the YA book community that, I think The Fault in Our Stars really brought this on. But sort of talking about books that deal with like illnesses and stuff. And I think a lot of the time these books sort of romanticize and glamorize the way that, that whole thing works. And I think that this book does a really good job at being very honest about that, and how not everything is sunshine and daisies and deeply poetic. Sometimes it just isn't a great situation, and I think that Jessie Andrews does a really good job at making this a really real and honest book. I feel like the portrayals of, grieving and depression and coping with all the things that happen are done really, really well in this book and are really respectful. But I also think that he does a really good job at not, like, obviously Rachel being sick is a big part of this book, but it's not the only thing about her, and it's not the only thing that's happening in this book. Like, there's so much happening that it kind of becomes background to everything, and Rachel's development as a character especially becomes way more important, which is really nice because he really fleshed out Rachel and made her a very deep and thoughtful character and didn't reduce her to this one thing about her, which I really liked seeing. So I liked that. And to sort of, sort of go along with that, Greg is also a really interesting narrator in the fact that he really genuinely, truly acts like a high schooler. He's very, like, sarcastic, he's witty, he's really kind of awkward sometimes, like, he's a very real character, who responds to things in a way that real people would. Like, he's not like, I'm a deep philosopher at the age of 17. He's like, man, I really don't know where I want to go to college, and also I've barely spoken to this girl, so I don't really know what to say. And I appreciated seeing that, because sometimes it's good to just see, like, real people and have an honest portrayal of a teenager, because sometimes it's a lot to see people who are, like, super deep and complex at 17, and not everyone, like, when you're 17, you're just trying to make it through the world, and I liked that Jessie Andrews wrote it like that. And that sort of ties into my, like, last point, is that I feel like this is a very ordinary and honest story, but it's an important story because there's validity to those stories, because these are things that could happen to, these are things that happen to real people, but the way that these characters handle it, are, I feel like, the way that real people would handle the situations that they're in. So yeah, I thought that was really good. Also, this book has a movie adaptation. I don't feel like it got a lot of hype, the movie, either, when it came out, but the movie's really good, actually. I think that it was well casted. I think the way it's filmed is really cool, and I think it's pretty true to the book, actually. So that's exciting. Yeah, so those are my 3 recommendations, and I hope you all have a good day, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.